Welcome back to this Thursday edition of Armchair Analysis. Today, it's all about the Northwestern Wildcats. Before we get started, again, today is the final day of this interesting setup here. Um, Again, unexpected travel. Couldn't really sort that out in a timely manner. So we're doing what we can here, but we'll be back. I'll be back in my own home starting on Friday, which is tomorrow. Um, it's gonna be a lot different looking. Well, not really different looking. It's gonna be back to what it was before. Um, but yeah, I just appreciate everybody for the patience and sticking around. Even though it's not necessarily been the highest of quality, again, the camera is not great. I'm using my laptop's camera, but it's been appreciated, and still the support has been appreciated too. So I thank you guys, and from the bottom of my heart, truly, I thank you guys. And let's go ahead and get into today, which is again Northwestern Wildcats, and I'm really excited to talk about this team because there's a lot of things that I think should bring excitement to Evanston. Obviously, a brand new stadium that should be debuting next year or 2027. I believe it's 26 though. A brand new Ryan Field that they're putting together. We've got David Braun, who has been successful so far. Last year was obviously a little bit less than advertised and less than expected, given they were 8-5 2 years ago. But there's some changes made, and I think that this team steps in here with the potential to improve. And I don't know if they do in the wins and losses area, but what I could see this turning into is a year of growth and improvement to where maybe this becomes a little more of an exciting portal destination. Obviously, Preston Stone coming into town is going to be a big deal. We'll talk about that and plenty of other things as we go. But as we always do when we start these things out, we talk about 2024, and in 2024, Northwestern was 4-8, 2-7 in Big Ten play, averaging 17.8 points per game, good for 128 in the country. Points per game allowed, 26.3. Turnover margin per game, negative at 0.3, which is good for 85th. The points per game allowed was good for 79th in America. This team recruited 66th rated class in the country and portaled in 68th. This is not a team that does flashy things. This is a team that goes out, takes care of business. This is a blue-collar program that proves a lot of their might and a lot of their doubters in the on-field side of things. They don't cut corners, especially the last two staffs, which has been the majority of my life, Pat Fitzgerald and now David Braun. They don't cut corners. They make sure they recruit and progress the right way. And I think they've done a really good job with that. Also maintaining academic standards, of course, a huge deal for Northwestern being such a prestigious academic school. But when we look at this team in 2025, it's a little bit of a new look. You got David Braun, of course, staying as the head coach, but Zach Lujan steps in from South Dakota State and brings a couple guys with him. Biggest name there is Griffin Wild. You're going to want to keep an eye on that name. Tim McGarrigle steps in is the defensive coordinator. Been around this program for a long time, and he's a guy who has done a really good job of linebackers. Patty Fisher, which I think I said a few weeks ago, he was like the mid-2010s. He was only there just back in 2020, which is unreal to me. It feels like it's been longer ago, but maybe at the same time, there's days where I still think it's 2020. So, yeah, it's very, very possible that I missed that. But Tim McGarrigle is a guy that I think is going to continue to kind of keep these defenses in the positions that we expect them to be, keeping this team in games because of how good the defense is. And we're going to talk about it because they did a really good job, I think, in the portal and in terms of development over the offseason. When you look at this offense, again, coordinated by Zach Lujan, At quarterback, Preston Stone out of SMU. I've been a Preston Stone apologist, I guess, really just a fan of Preston Stone since he's been at SMU. And obviously, I was not a big fan of the way things were handled by that coaching staff and by that program. It worked out for them, and I'm happy that did, because it still helped me be correct in a lot of ways. But it allows Preston Stone to transfer out and get a new start, and to take on this program at Northwestern and focusing on academics, but also being able to be on the field and be the projected starter, I think it's a really big deal for him. I think he's going to kind of flourish in this position, and I think it's going to be one of those things where we see Northwestern be maybe more like a 20 to 21 point per game team just by the basic changes they've made. Running back, you got Cam Porter, 500-yard rusher last year. Joseph Hyman, another one. I think that Cam Porter is going to be a guy that breaks out onto the scene this year, really becomes a true number one running back in this system and really around the country. Becomes a guy that maybe pushes for some all-conference honors. I just think that he has a lot of potential. Hasn't been realized. The offensive line last year was awful, and some changes were made there. They got 5 graduate players on this roster. I believe 4 of those are grad transfers. But Cam Porter is going to be a big deal to this offense, and probably going to be Preston Stone's best friend as they go through the year. But the receiver room is not bad. I have some lofty expectations for this receiver room. Frank Covey IV, Griffin Wild, and Chase Farrell. Again, Wild comes over with Lujan from South Dakota State. Chase Farrell comes over from Stanford. 2 guys. And then Alex Lyons comes from New Mexico State. This is a receiving room that I think could be one of the more underrated in terms of the Power 5. And I think that when we look at what they are and what they turn into and how they progress through the season, we might be sitting back talking about this team being a little bit better, especially if Zach Lujan can put together correct play calls and good play designs. And I have no reason to believe that won't happen, because we saw what he's done at South Dakota State. He's back-to-back national champion. This is probably the best Northwestern offense we've seen in quite a while, quite some time. I would have to go back. Oh, man, probably to Kane Coulter, maybe, in terms of dynamic offenses here at Northwestern. That doesn't mean that it's not going to be... Doesn't mean it's not going to have its struggles, because this is one of the toughest schedules in Big Ten Conference play, hands down, and we'll talk more about that later. But this is an interesting spot offensively. As for the defense, again, led by Tim McGarrigle, 7 of 11 players returned from 2024, which is a big deal, but they do bring in Jack Sadowski and Yanni Karloftis, both linebackers. Sadowski comes over from Iowa State, Karloftis comes over from Purdue. These are 2 guys in the portal. I mean, these are the biggest wins of the offseason for Northwestern. And what a time to have them when you have 2 solid guys go out at linebacker last year, leave. And you get, you replace them, I don't want to say tenfold, but you replace them with players with very high ceilings, very high floors. This feels like a really solid foundation, and you just have to see where you're going to go from there. Dylan Tatum's coming in from Michigan State. He's going to play safety and probably be a bigger part of that secondary. And, truth be told, I expect just overall improvement. This is a team who, with 26.3 points per game allowed, was fine. I think that they want to be more of an aggressive defense and create more turnovers. I say that a lot with a lot of these teams, but this is one of those that I wholeheartedly believe, because, of course, David Braun coming from Northwestern, coming from being the defensive coordinator at Northwestern prior to his 10 years as head coach now, defensive-minded, 100% wants this team and this unit to be as stout as ever. Tim McGarrigle, being in this program for a long time, also has that same mindset, you would think. It really makes you wonder what this team can be. As for my overall thoughts on this team, the roster feels like it can be much better than the record I'm going to predict here. And the simplest thing is that this is one of the most brutal schedules in college football. You get 2 tough non-conference games, and we'll talk about the schedule here, but you get 2 relatively tough non-conference games. And then the Big Ten schedule just hampers any thoughts of being a true, I don't want to say contender, but even a spoiler in the conference. It makes it really tough to feel that way. So as we sit here, let's go ahead and take a look as I pull it up. You start out, you go on the road to New Orleans, and that's going to be tough playing Tulane. I don't know how you get out of that one unscathed, or at least without some question marks, because Tulane's good, and I love John Summerall. I've been very, very clear that John Summerall is one of my favorite coaches in the sport, and whenever he makes it to Power 5, it's going to happen. Whenever he makes it to Power 5, he is going to succeed without questions asked. But then you get Western Illinois. That's at least a decent game to kind of build some confidence. And then Oregon, ULM is going to be a tougher game than people expect. I mean, UCLA is going to be a tough game. ULM is going to be tough. Everybody's expecting ULM to continue to improve off of what they were able to do last year. It's a big deal for them. You go on the road to Happy Valley, face Penn State. You get Purdue, who's going to be improved from last year. Nebraska, USC, both on the road. Michigan at home, and then Minnesota and Illinois to close it out. By the way, 4 road games is incredible. A couple of these games, I believe that Michigan and Minnesota setup here is at Wrigley Field, if I'm not mistaken. So we've got some interesting schedule dynamics. We have just an outright interesting schedule period. And it really makes you wonder what they can be, what their ceiling is, what the floor can be. And it really depends on what these teams are around them, because this is a team that I could see probably 5 or 6 wins out of, maybe even 7. And 7, I think, would be an unreal season given what the other teams around them are supposed to be and should be. I would say it's more likely that they miss a bowl game, and 5 is probably their true middle ground. And I would say the floor is probably 2 or 3. If you only win 2, it's a little more problematic, but I would say 3 is probably the floor here. Over-under sits at 3.5, plus 30,000 to win the Big Ten. Again, that's dead last. And their national championship odds are plus 100,000. So with that said, let's go ahead and predict this schedule. Starting on the road against Tulane, I'm going to go ahead and say loss. And it's simply because there's a lot to figure out about this program and about this team in a very short amount of time. Obviously, spring practice happens, and then you got the portal after spring. And then you have to figure out, can you be cohesive, I guess would be the word, by the time fall rolls around. This is a team that I feel like may take a little bit to figure it out. Now, if they are on their A game early, they will win this game. But this one being on the road, that combination, along with just the fact that there's a lot more for them to put together than there is for Tulane, it just doesn't feel like it's, again, puts you in position to win football games. We move on. You'll get a win. If you're Northwestern, you'll get a win over Western Illinois. That's going to be a pretty simple one that gets you set up. You'll play Oregon, and you're going to lose. I don't think there's really much reason to talk much about that one. We move on. I'm going to pull my mouse back here so I don't have to lean forward. We move on to UCLA, and that's going to be a win for Northwestern. This game being in Evanston. Now, this would mean more if Ryan Field was ready or was playable or existed currently. But this game, for me, I buy more into the defense of Northwestern. I buy more into the team as a whole and not just one player. And even then, the quarterback position, and some people are going to be really frustrated to hear me say this, the quarterback position I feel is relatively even. Nico Iamaleava is a very, very big deal for UCLA, but what they have around him doesn't really give me this huge vote of confidence for the whole program. It's a little tough. This is a tough game to pick because these two teams I think are on an even or a more even playing field than some others. But I'm taking Northwestern to win this one. They'll get the win over ULM. It's going to be just a tough game to kind of figure out who you are and whether or not you are, I guess, capable of rising to an occasion, especially when you start getting punched in the mouth. And this is going to be another game where that's going to happen. ULM is not a slouch opponent the way they were probably 5 or 6 years ago when this was more likely scheduled. This is a team that can win, and I wouldn't say beat anybody, but could definitely beat a lower level Power 5 school. Northwestern has to be careful, but I think they'll get through this with a win. They'll go on the road to face Penn State, and they'll lose. There's really not much else to say about that one for now. As for this Purdue game, I picked it as a loss, or as a win for Purdue originally, and that's what we're sticking with for now. But I have a sneaking suspicion that this game is going to be super close, super fun, competitive. I really miss the days of like ESPN2, and Beth Mowins was calling all these games. At the time, the 3:30 slot was a Big Ten slot on ESPN2, and it was usually a Northwestern, Minnesota, Northwestern, Purdue, Northwestern and Illinois, somebody like that. But they were always some of the most fun games you could find on television. That's what this game reminds me of. That's what I think it's going to end up being. Two lower-level Big Ten teams who are just having it out with each other. It's going to be a lot of fun on that one. You're going to lose on the road in Nebraska. I'm going to go ahead and just pop it up. A loss at USC. 2 road games back-to-back that I think are going to be really tough, and you're going to be in the middle of 3 out of 4 on the road. It's not going to be easy, but these are not games that are just completely non-winnable or games that you just don't go in and win. You can certainly make that happen. I think that this 3-game stretch here could really change the season, especially if they win 2 out of these 3. I mean, we're looking at that, given you do everything else that's on here. We're looking at 2 out of these 3, plus you maybe start out with Tulane a little better. And we're talking, at this point, 7-2. How unlikely could that be? Or if you even go 2 out of 3, you're looking at 6-3. How unreal would that be, and what would that look like for this team? I mean, that's a question to be answered. And then not only that, what if Michigan doesn't get it right? What if Bryce Underwood is not the answer that everybody thinks he's going to be? Well, then that 4th loss there could turn into a win. And we could be talking about only winning 3 out of 5, given that Penn State game all the way through Michigan. And then, well, let's take a look at this. Minnesota is a team that I think, personally, is going to be really good. I think they're going to kind of sneak around in this conference conversation. I think they have one of the best running back rooms in the country, if not the best. A.J. Turner, Darius Taylor, those are 2 of the best players, I think, at running back position in college football. In saying that, I'm taking Minnesota to win that game too. I'm going to take Illinois. I'm sitting at 3-9. But humor me for a second, if I may. You look at that Tulane game up at the top, and I know where I'm pointing because I'm looking above the camera here. If you look at that Tulane game and you mark that as a win, you're walking out of that first 6 at 4-2. I don't think Northwestern can beat Oregon, and I don't think they can beat Penn State, but they can win any of the other 4. You go to the bottom half, given different projections and perspectives, this is not, every one of those 6 on the bottom is winnable. And in saying that, I'm not saying it's an 80-20 chance. No, it's very likely sitting at 70-30 at max, at the most. Maybe 75-25. But that's only for 1 or 2 of these games. Every other game, we don't have a true answer. We don't know what USC is going to be. We have no idea what Nebraska is going to be. We presume that Matt Rule and his third-year rule, where he takes a team and puts it together, and that team goes out and wins 9 to 12 games. We don't know that that's going to happen. Purdue, we don't know what Barry Odom's going to be able to do with a huge transfer portal-ridden roster at Ross-Ade Stadium. We don't know what they're going to be. Michigan, we don't know what Bryce Underwood's going to be. We've never seen him on the field against a real opponent taking live snaps. So, in all of those, we don't know. And then Minnesota and Illinois are probably the more solidified out of those final 6. But even those 2 are not guaranteed losses for Northwestern. Is there a world where 10-2 happens? I don't think there is. I just don't. I think that would be outrageously unrealistic. Is there a world where that 9-3 turns into a 7-5 or maybe even another 8-4 like they just did a couple years ago? Or they were 8-5 2 years ago, I suppose, and they beat Utah in the bowl game. So 7-5. So to go 8-4 or have an 8-win season this year, is that out of the realm of possibility? Certainly not, especially sitting here and looking at the schedule another time. Is it as brutal as we think? It's tough to say. Obviously, a lot of projection and really looking to the future plays into the fact that a lot of people would expect Nebraska, USC, Michigan, and Illinois to be really good, certainly. And then, again, Oregon and Penn State, we expect to be 2 Big Ten championship contenders again. And then you have to wonder, okay, what about Minnesota? What about Purdue? What about Tulane? It's not impossible to say 7-5, 8-4. I'm going with the fact that in my mind, the teams that we're talking about are going to be better. And I don't know about better in coaching, but I think that when we look at these teams, certainly one of the things is not like the other, being talent. And I think that's what's going to ultimately hinder Northwestern at the biggest point here. But it's not impossible. And I'm also, I didn't give enough credit to UCLA. That could change some things. But I think 3-9 to 4-8 is probably the likely area. Do not be surprised to see 5, 6, or 7 on the board for wins here for Northwestern. This is a really tough team to predict because, again, it's not on them, because I think they're going to be good. I think that they are going to be one of the best teams below 500, should they be below 500, in 2025. However, it relies on a lot of different variables and things that happen, and we know in college football that there is no guarantee at any point. So that's how we feel. 3-9, 1-8. Again, not an indictment on the Wildcats whatsoever, but certainly a way things can happen. Let me know, as always, if you're a Northwestern fan or a fan just in general of college football, something I may have missed, a player, a name that I didn't acknowledge through this video. As I always tell everybody, especially if you're a fan of the team I'm previewing in these videos, you know your team better than I know your team. It's hard for me to sit here and know everything about everybody, no matter how hard I try, and I do. It just doesn't always happen. It's not ever going to happen the way we would like it to. But the goal is that people walk away knowing a little bit more than they knew before they watched the video, especially when they're a college football fan. And that's just the biggest thing, is information and being informative, but also doing it the right way, not overblowing things, not taking things out of proportion, just being neutral and talking about things for what they are. If you've gotten this far in the video, please leave a like, subscribe, comment down below. Let me know what you think. Let me know your thoughts on Northwestern 2025. Tomorrow, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know what's coming tomorrow. It will be a video. I just don't know what team it is. Well, hang on. For the sake of unprofessional recording here, let's go ahead and see what it will be, because I'm not fully certain. So it's going to be an SEC team. I can tell you that. That's about as far as I can get. It will be Auburn. There you go. The Auburn Tigers tomorrow. So make sure you want to tune in for that, because I've got plenty to say about them. I can tell you that right now. Their transfer portal moves, Hugh Freeze, all the above. We're going to have a good, fun conversation about Auburn. So make sure you stick around, and to do so, leave a like, subscribe, comment down below. Mostly just subscribe. It's free. Help us hit our goal. Our goal is to hit 100 subscribers by the end of July. So doing that, hitting that button, will help me get to that goal a little bit sooner. But again, couldn't be more appreciative. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you tomorrow for the Auburn Tigers preview.